Alright, so we're going to pick up where we left off last video, where we'll open back up our Visual Studio demo project. So in Visual Studio 2019, it will suggest the last thing you worked on. In 2015, you might have to go into the File Open menu. So in our case, we'll just click this fellow. It'll open our project back up, which might take a few seconds. There we are. Now, today we're going to be looking at declaring strings. Now, a string is basically a special variable that's designed to hold data. And that's what variables do. They are a method for computers to hold data. Now, of variables, there are lots of different types. Strings, doubles, integers, the list goes on. But today we're looking at strings, and that's basically text. So, in C#, the variable type string is designed to hold text. This includes numbers that we might treat as text, such as a phone number. So if you're holding a number in memory that you don't want to do mathematical functions on, then we might store it as text. Okay? Now, first of all, let's make our form a little bit bigger. Now, we're still working on the last form we worked on, last project we worked on, so there's main, but we're going to be working on the form that we created last lesson called frm_dec_var, and let's start by creating a group box. Group box, drag it onto the screen, drag it to be a decent size. There we go. Now we'll call, in the properties box down here, we'll change the text to strings, like so, strings. We might change the name to GPB STR, just to keep things neat. Now, we'll be using a new item that I haven't shown you before, called a label. Let's search for a label in the toolbox. There it is. That's the one, label. Now again, we've got to give them, like always, we have to give the new item a name immediately. So this one we will be calling LBL strings. Okay, now if we scroll down to text where it says label 1, what we'll do is we'll write out a brief description of what a string is. So, in C#, the type brackets string is designed to hold text. This includes numbers that we would treat as text. Now, when I say this includes numbers, I would like you to draw to your attention that it actually includes any ASCII character, so exclamation marks, brackets, hashtags, whatever you guys do these days. Basically anything that can be represented as text will be stored as a string. Okay, so where were we up to? This includes numbers that we would treat as text, such as phone numbers. Now, just click off that, and whoa, it went off way off the screen, didn't it? Now, this is a little bit of information above and beyond what we're going to be doing today, but we will be rejigging this label so it makes some sense. Alright, so this is something that we'll be using the properties for. So what we're looking for is auto size. So first of all, auto size, click false. Now that makes the situation even worse. So you notice the label got tiny there, but we do now have sliders that we can now control the label size. So there we go, we can drag it to be bigger and more square. And let's change the font. So if we come down to font, hit the three dots, and we open up this little font menu. Sans serif is fine. If you want to change it to something else, go for it. Whatever looks good. I'm just going to make the text a little bit bigger. There we go. Nice and easy to read. I might make the text of this bigger too, to be honest. And there we go. All right. That really doesn't, we now know that in theory, but let's talk about declaring the variables. So how can this be done? Add that little full stop. So first thing we're going to do is add two text boxes. So text box into the toolbox, drag it into our little control box here, size it here. Now this first text box will be txt string input. Okay? Now another text box, same size, identical, except for this one will be called txt string output. Now we need a button. So there we go. Now I'm going to not bother with neatening this up by labeling that as an input and that as an output. But if you wanted to do that, you can use a label. But for now, what I'd like us to do is give the button a name. So btn string run, and give it the text string run. Alright, so now we have three items that are of any consequence anyway. So we've got two text boxes and a button. Text box 1 called text string input. Text box 2 is called text string output. And the button is called button string run. So what we're going to now do is double click the button. Now this will take us to a code view with the event method already created. So again, like last lesson, we'll put it in between the brackets, and what we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer to create a space in memory to store a string. So we're going to do this by typing string. Now that declares that we're going to create a variable called a type called a string. Now we'll give our space in memory a name, so we'll call it input string. We add the semicolon, and there we go. We've created a space in the memory of type string called input string. Now, for this demonstration, we'll take an input from the top text box, the input text box, store it as a string, and then output it. So this can be done by, if we now type in input string equals txt, and you see the Visual Studio actually makes us a suggestion. We want the input box, so txt string input, and types it out for us, and then we can put a semicolon. Now that has thrown an error. Now basically what we've told the computer to do is give the input string the value of a text box, not the value of the thing in the text box. So how do we fix that? And it's actually quite simple. So we actually just put a .txt at the end of text string input. Okay, just like that. Now, instead of telling it to be a text box, we're actually telling it to have the value of the text in the text box. It's a bit weird, but it's how programming works, because there's actually quite a lot of things you can do to text boxes. So all these various things, settings, is actually different things you can do to the text box. Now we tell it what we're going to do to the text box by doing the dot and then whatever you're going to do, in this case text. So this gives input string the value of whatever's in that text box. But to put it back into the output text box, it's as simple as doing it the other way around. So txt string.output dot text equals. Now let's just do something to that string just to make sure that we understand it. So let's say input string, but let's add some of our own text to it. So we can do that by going plus, yep, and then putting some bunny ears or quotation marks. There we go. And then let's type a message. This is what you inputted. Now you'll notice I put a space there. If you don't put a space, if we didn't put a space here, the T would actually go up against the last letter of whatever they put into input string. When we're combining strings, a space actually counts as a character, so there's no difference in between that T and the space I've now got highlighted. So whenever you're putting strings together like this, we actually need to ensure we get the spaces together. So for an example, see, if we now run this, so you'll notice I did not put a space at the end of input, and I haven't put a space for C. If we now run this, so click start, declaring variables, test. We have no space in between inputted and C. So let's close that. To deal with this, all we need to do is add a space. Okay, so that's the conclusion of this video. It's a short one because declaring a variable is a fairly simple thing to do. And there we go.